Bright Duty. Every student matters.
Welcome to another lecture, and in today's class we are going to do the 5th chapter of your book, the name of which is Invictus. Now first of all, the chapter's name, which is Invictus, is actually a poem which was written by William Ernest Henley. Now this poem served as an inspiration in the life of Nelson Mandela. We all know who is Nelson Mandela. We all have read about him. We all have heard about him, and we all know about his bravery and the special acts that he has done for the people. Now, Nelson Mandela, we all know, was somebody who fought against the practice of apartheid. Apartheid means discrimination between the blacks and the whites. So basically, Nelson Mandela was somebody who fought for the blacks, and he wanted to make sure that they get justice in every form whatsoever. So in this story, he basically is sharing with us a few incidents of his life that took place after he became a president, and what relevance does this poem Invictus hold on his life is what matters the most. And when I read that poem for you, when I explain that poem to you, you all are going to agree with me that if not anything, the poem was certainly a big time motivation for each one of us. So without wasting much time, let us start reading the chapter. So after spending decades in Robben Island prison, Nelson Mandela was released in 1990. Immediately he began working to bring about an end to apartheid and initiate full democratic elections where the black majority population could vote. He won the race for President of South Africa and came to office in 1994. Racial tensions were rampant in every strata of society. This is evident from the fact that Mandela's security team, comprising both old white and new black officials, were at loggerheads despite sharing the same goals and joy. Therefore, Mandela's immediate challenge was balancing black aspirations with white fears, tackling crime and unemployment, the country's most crucial problems. So basically, Nelson Mandela spent a decade. Decade is a time period of 10 years. So he spent a decade in Robben Island prison. Now this basically, Robben Island is basically an island which is 7 kilometers off the town of Cape Town in South Africa. And this prison that was situated on the Robben Island, Nelson Mandela was a part of this, prison. He was basically a culprit, he was a prisoner, and he spent 10 years of his life in that prison. He was released in 1990. Immediately, as soon as he came out of the prison, he began working to bring about an end to apartheid. So, he wanted this apartheid to come to an end, this black and white discrimination. He wanted this to come to an end at any cost. So, he started working in that direction and initiate full democratic elections where the black majority population could vote. And he wanted to organize elections in such a manner that even the black people should be allowed to vote. You know, because of this apartheid, the black people were considered to be of the lowest race and they were not allowed to participate in any of the important events or any of the important things that took place in the country. They had no say whatsoever. So he wanted that in these elections, even the black people should have the right to vote. He won the race for the president of South Africa. So when the blacks voted, they obviously voted for a man who wanted their betterment, who wanted them to develop and to make progress, and thus Nelson Mandela became the president of South Africa, and he took his office in 1994. Racial tensions were rampant in every strata of society. Rampant means widespread. Strata means part. So, every part of the society at that time, there were racial tensions. Racial again refers to the discrimination between, on the basis of skin, race. So, people were actually fighting with each other over races, over their skin color. This is evident from the fact that Mandela's security team, comprising both old white and new black officials, were at loggerheads despite sharing the same goals and jobs. And he says that this is very much evident from the fact that when Nelson Mandela became the president, his security team had the white people, the old white people. Old white people refers to those security personnel who were already working, who were there with the earlier presidents also. And now that Nelson Mandela was the president, so they became his security personnel, as well as the new black employees. So there were new black people, there were new black officials whom Nelson Mandela had appointed after he became the president. So they were always at loggerheads. Being at loggerheads means to always have a dispute, to always fight over something. So these whites and black who worked for the same person, that is Nelson Mandela, who had the same goal in life, that was to protect him or to work for the betterment of the country. So despite having the same set of goals, the same objectives, they were always fighting with each other. Therefore, Mandela's immediate challenge was balancing black aspirations with white fears. Now, in this last line, he's talked about the most important challenges that he came across when he became the president. The first was to balance black aspirations with white fears. Aspirations means wishes, desires. Now that the blacks could see that one of them was a president, their wishes, their expectations were obviously increasing. And the white people were getting afraid. They had this fear in them that what is going to happen with them now. So he first had to balance this. He wanted the people to know that just because he himself was black, that does not mean that he is going to be fair only to the black and unfair to the white. So he wanted the people to believe that, A. Second, he had to tackle the crime and unemployment. The crime rate of the country, the level of unemployment of the country, which was at a very bad, which was rising at a very high pace, he had to control it. These were the country's most crucial problems. Crucial means important, vital, significant. So these were the most important problems of the country at that time, and he wanted to sort them out. One day, Mandela happened to attend a game of the Springboks, the country's rugby union team. He found that the non-white people in the stadium jeered at their home squad because the Springboks, an all-white team, symbolized the prejudice that marred their lives. Mandela felt that a transformation in this sport would go a long way in healing apartheid and its residual scars. Keeping in mind that South Africa would host the 1995 Rugby World Cup, he called a meeting of the newly formed black-dominated South African Sports Committee, which had retained the Springbok team's name and colors. So what happened now? One day, Nelson Mandela, he attended a game of the Springboks. Now, what is Springboks? Springboks is the name of the country's rugby union team. We all know rugby as a sport. We all have seen that. In this game, basically, there is a ball, a rugby ball basically, and the one who has that, The only task the person is supposed to do is to take that ball from one end to the other without being pinned down. Okay. So, Springboks was the name of the country's rugby team. He found that the non-white people in the stadium jeered. Jeered means to make fun of somebody, to mock at somebody. So when this game was going on, in the stadium there were non-white people also, there were blacks also, and these people were making fun of their home team, squad, their team. So, irrespective of the fact that Springboks was their country's rugby team, they were still making fun of this team because according to them, this team, which was an all-white team, there were only white players in this game, it symbolized the prejudice that marred their lives. Prejudice means discrimination. Marred means that had spoiled their lives. So, since that team had only white members, they were not ready to accept that. They had no appreciation, no motivation for that team at all. Mandela felt, he realized that a transformation in this sport would go a long way in healing apartheid. So, according to him, if he is able to transform this game somehow, transform means change. So, according to him, if he is able to transform this game in some way, then this will surely heal. Heal, cure. Whatever problems, whatever, pain, whatever scars the people have because they have been a victim of apartheid. So, according to Mandela, if he was able to bring about a change in this game, he was sure that this will change the perceptions of the people also. Keeping in mind that South Africa would host the 1995 Rugby World Cup, he called a meeting of the newly formed black-dominated South African Sports Committee, which had retained the Springbok team's name and colours. So, Nelson Mandela knew that in 1995, their country was going to be the host of the Rugby World Cup. So, he called for a meeting, and in this meeting, he called the new sports committee, which was an all-black sports committee, who despite being blacks and despite being against the old rugby team, had still agreed to accept the name Springboks and whatever colours the team had infused. The colours yellow and green along with the Springbok name had long symbolized an oppressive white minority. They were predominantly a white team with just one black player. They wore the colours green and gold, the same colour as the flag of apartheid South Africa, and they played rugby, the privileged sport of the white. So, what happened? The colours yellow and green. So, the colour of their rugby, yellow and green, along with the Springbok name, had long symbolized an oppressive white minority. Oppressive, somebody who believes in dominating you. Somebody who believes in oppressing you, controlling you, establishing an authority over you. So, for a long time, this game was played by whites, and they always believed in oppressing the blacks. Here, and also he has told us that team, the earlier rugby team, was a white team and it had just one black player in it. They wore colours green and gold, the same colour as the flag of apartheid South Africa. And these people, the new Springbok team that was now formed, they wore the colour green and gold because this colour was there in the flag of apartheid, South Africa, and they played rugby. So, the new black team now played rugby, which was earlier beyond their reach because it was only considered to be a white. So, this was the first change he brought about. Nelson Mandela met the captain of Springbok, Francois Pinar. He did not say so in so many words, but Pinar understood Mandela's underlying message that if the Springboks could capture the imagination and support of the non-whites and do well in the approaching World Cup, it would go a long way in unifying the country. He told Pinar about a poem called Invictus that had egged him on during his prison stint, motivating him to stand when all he wanted to do was lie down. So what happened? Nelson Mandela expressed his desire to meet the captain of this rugby team. His name was Francois Pinar. He did not say so in so many words. So, Nelson Mandela did not have to use many words to express what he wanted, because Pinar understood the underlying message, the hidden message in what Nelson Mandela had told him, that if Springboks could capture the imagination and support of non-whites and do well in the approaching World Cup, it would go a long way in unifying the country. So what Nelson Mandela simply wanted was that this new team, Springboks, when they play for the World Cup, they should make sure that it is a mixed team with both black as well as the white spots, because this way the entire country will be united. You know, imagine the stadium that was earlier only occupied with the whites cheering for the team and the blacks jeering them, making fun of them. Now, there would be a team that has both whites and blacks and they are both cheering on for the same team. So, there is obviously going to be an entire environment of unity, and this is exactly what Nelson Mandela wanted. He told Pinar about a poem called Invictus that egged him on during his prison stint, motivating him to stand when all he wanted to do was lie down. So it was then when Nelson Mandela made a mention of this poem called Invictus. This poem, according to him, had egged him. Egged him means had motivated him, had inspired him when he was in prison stint during his stay in the prison, and it was this poem that motivated him to stand when he wanted to lie. Means when he'd lost all his hopes, when he'd lost all his energy, it was only this poem that pushed him to go ahead and to do what he always did. So we are going to read this beautiful poem now. Out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole, I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. So, basically, out of the nights that cover me, what does he wants to say? Night over here is basically a metaphor for all the problems that he was dealing with in his life. So, according to him, whatever problems, whatever hardships, whatever difficulties he was facing at that time, black as the pit from pole to pole. Black as the pit from pole to pole means that the only thing that he could see around himself was darkness. He could not see any hope, any brightness, anything in his future. He only could see darkness all around. I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. He says that my soul, which was unconquerable, to conquer something means to have victory over something. So he says that my soul, which at one point of time had actually given up, it is only the God. He says whatever God is around us, I thank that God for having pushed me, for having motivated me, and for not letting me die, both physically as well as mentally. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloody but unbound. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade, and yet the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. He says that in the fell clutch of circumstance, clutch refers to basically the hold of something. So he says that I was very tightly held, I was very tightly grasped by my circumstances, by the situation I was trapped in, but I was never winced. I never felt the pain, never did I cry out aloud so that the people could know that I was weak. I never let them know about what was going on inside me. Under the bludgeonings of chance. Bludgeonings of chance. Now the word bludgeonings basically means, when you hit somebody with a club, with a bat-like thing, when you hit somebody, that's a bludgeoning. So he says that there were so many moments when circumstances had hit me so bad that my head was bloody. I was filled with blood. I was all wounded. Now here it does not mean that he was bleeding all about. What he means to say over here is that he was wounded, he was injured, he was harmed, he was hurt, but unbowed. Bow means to bend in front of someone, and unbowed means to stand still, to stand strong, to stand straight. So he says that I was definitely injured, I was definitely hurt, I was definitely sad, but I did not bow down, I did not give up. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of shade. He says that in this place, when I was in the jail, that place was of wrath and tears. Wrath, anger, annoyance, rage. He could only feel anger and rage in the people he was surrounded by. He was surrounded by people who would cry for whatever losses they've borne in their lives. Looms but the horror of shade. He says, in that place, what happens beyond this place, even if when I was in the jail, when I would think of a life outside this prison, I could only see shade. Horror of the shade means that I could only imagine things to turn more horrifying for me. It was not that according to Nelson Mandela, once he would come out of the jail, things are going to be very easy. No. He had very well imagined that if in the prison it was bad, outside the prison it is going to be worse for him. And yet the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. He says, despite that, whatever problems, whatever threats I have faced in my life all across, they have only and only found and made me stronger and unafraid. I have been through so many problems in my life that now a new problem does not scare me. So this is what Nelson Mandela remarked upon. It matters not how straight the gate, how charged with punishments the scroll. I am the master of my fate, I am the captain of my soul. So again, he, in the poem he had written that it does not matter how straight the gate, straight, narrow. So the way for me, the road for me is very narrow. I know there are going to be multiple punishments, multiple problems for me that I'll have to face on my way. But I am a master of my fate. I know how to win over my fate, and I am the captain of my soul. I know how to control myself. Now, as you people can clearly see, it is written that this poem that we've just read, the poem was just an additional, thing in this chapter in order to reinforce something inspirational. It is not going to be tested individually. So, this is not a poem for your curriculum. This is just a part of this chapter. So as I told you, the poem is as beautiful and as inspirational as I had told you earlier. Now the situation in the squad saw a gradual change. The players started to interact with the locals and the locals began to warm up to the players. During the games, support for the home team started to build up among the non-whites. People of all races turned up to extend their support. Mandela acted upon the suggestion of many security guards and sported a Springbok jersey with a Pienaar's number 6 on it. The home crowd chanted his name as he came into the stadium. This was in sharp contrast to a prior rugby match in which some of the white people in the crowd had jeered at him. So now what happened? This situation in the squad, it saw a gradual change. Over a period of time, the situation of the team began to improve. So there was an improvement that could be seen. The players had started to interact with the locals. So the people around, they started to interact with each other. The team started to interact with the people around and they began to warm up. There was some sort of affection, some sort of interaction that could be felt. During the games, support for the home team started to build up among the non-whites. So when the game also began, among the non-white people also, even those who were non-whites, they also started supporting the team now. People of all races turned up to extend their support. Every race, be it a white or a non-white, they all turned up in order to support their team. Mandela acted upon the suggestion of many security guards and sported a Springbok jersey with Pienaar's number 6 on it. And in order to encourage, in order to motivate his team, even Mandela, he also wore a Springbok's jersey with Pienaar's number 6 written on it. And this suggestion was given to him by his security personnel. This was in sharp contrast to a prior rugby match in which some of the white people in the crowd had jeered at him. So what happened? Prior in the earlier rugby match that he had attended, the team was made fun of by the non-white people. We've just read that. So the non-white people, they had made fun of the team. As the team progressed further in the tournament, the tension started to ease between the security members in the Mandela's team. So as the team progressed, means as the team proceeded further in the competition, in this tournament, in the World Cup, the tension which was there among the people, that started to ease out. The people were actually feeling light and they were not fighting with each other that much. Support for the home team picked up as the black members threw off their hatred for the sport and together with their white countrymen enthusiastically supported the national team. A testimony to that is the image of some white police officers rejoicing by hoisting a young black boy on their shoulders. The Springbok team, mediocre at best, was not expected to go beyond the quarterfinals, but they overcame the odds and made it to the finals. They faced the New Zealand team, the most triumphant rugby team in the world and the favourite. The New Zealand team was almost unconquerable. Their star player, John Alomu, was in fantastic form and it was expected to be a mere formality that New Zealand would lift the World Cup. Motivated by the home crowd, Pienaar and his team pushed themselves to the limits. They ended in a tie whereupon the game went in extra time. It resulted in a memorable victory for the whole home team. So you see what happened, as I told you, that the tension that was there between the whites and the non-whites, that started to become easy. The people had stopped fighting with each other. and the support for the home team picked up as the black members threw off their hatred for sport. So one could see that the people, for the love of this game, they were ready to let go of their hatred towards each other, their fight with each other. And together, the blacks, along with their white countrymen, they supported the national team very, very enthusiastically. With a lot of energy, they supported the team. A testimony to that, and evidence of that, was the image of some white people who had picked up, there were some white police officers who were rejoicing, who were expressing their happiness by actually picking and, letting a black boy, a small, young black boy sitting on their shoulders. So this was a fact that their hatred was actually going a bit at ease. The Springbok team, mediocre at best. Mediocre means somebody who is not very good, who's not very bad, just the middle way out. So the Springbok team was not that good at the sport, and it was expected that they would not even go beyond the quarterfinals. But they overcame the odds. Overcame the odds means they actually let go of all the bad circumstances and they entered the finals. When they entered the finals, the team opposite to them was New Zealand. That was the most triumphant, victorious. The rugby team that had won maximum matches and had taken back home the maximum World Cup. The New Zealand team was unconquerable. The New Zealand team was so good at the game that you could not even imagine conquering that team. You could not imagine winning over that team. Their star player, whose name was Jonah Lomu, was in a wonderful form. When in sports we talk about the form of the sports people. So he was in wonderful form, and it was a simple formality that New Zealand only would lift the World Cup. So everybody knew, everybody was prepared that it was New Zealand only that is going to win and take the World Cup. Motivated by the home crowd, so when the crowd motivated them so much, Pienaar and his team, they pushed themselves to the limit. Pushed themselves to the limits means they did whatever they could. They spared every bit of their energy in this game, and the game ended in a tie. And then after the tie, there was an extra time. And the extra time basically resulted in a memorable victory for the home team. So the rugby team, the South African rugby team, Springboks, they actually won the World Cup, facing and giving away all the problems and making way for a new country and a new hope. President and the captain met on the field to celebrate the impossible happening amidst a crowd comprising 62,000 people of myriad races. Mandela congratulated Pienaar for his spectacular efforts, but Pienaar graciously insisted that it was Mandela who merited the glory. So after the home team won this game, they won the World Cup, President Nelson Mandela, whom as we had read in the last part of the video, himself had worn the jersey of Springbok team with Pienaar's number 6 written on it. He and the captain Pienaar, they met on the field amidst means in the middle of a crowd that had 62,000 people of myriad, multiple races. It was not only blacks or whites, there were multiple races people who were there. Mandela, he obviously congratulated Pienaar for the spectacular efforts, for the wonderful efforts that he had put in order to make this World Cup as theirs. But it was Pienaar who graciously insisted, very respectfully he insisted that it was Mandela who had merited glory. So it was actually Mandela, because of him they could win, and he credited everything to Mandela only. With the end of apartheid, other countries rapidly ended their boycott against South Africa. The countries hosting and winning of the 1995 Rugby World Cup was a powerful boost to post-apartheid South Africa's return to international sporting scene. The 2010 Football World Cup was also held in South Africa. So, once this black and white discrimination came to an end, the other countries also ended their boycott against South Africa. So, earlier, because of this apartheid, they had boycotted South Africa altogether. So, that also came to an end. The country hosted the 1995 Rugby World Cup, and this acted as a powerful boost to post-apartheid South Africa's return to international sporting scene. So, because of South Africa hosting the 1995 Rugby World Cup, it was easier for them to enter the international game of sports after the apartheid period came to an end. The 2010 Football World Cup was also held in South Africa. People all over the world had said that Mandela's people needed a leader, and he gave them a champion. So, across the world, Mandela's people, everyone in the world, they were saying that Mandela's people refers to the blacks, the non-whites basically. So, everyone in the world was saying that the non-whites, they needed a leader. They wanted somebody who could lead them, who can take them to the right direction, who can channelize their energies in a positive direction. But what they got was a champion. They got Nelson Mandela, who was unbeatable. He was a champion. Pride has many faces. It could be a noble one, as in the case of Mandela. It could be obscene or cruel face too. Mandela chose the noble phase and rose above his conditions, not only from his prison cell but also in the struggle to unite his country. So, the writer says that pride has many faces. One who is popular, one who knows he has done something good. There can be multiple faces to those people. One is a noble one. Such people can choose to be kind, they can choose to be soft-hearted and good. There are, as it was the case of Mandela, there are a few people who become obscene, who become very vulgar, they just lose track of everything that they do because of the pride that they have. And there are other people who become cruel also, who become very heartless and selfish to everyone around. Mandela chose the noble face and rose above his conditions. Nelson Mandela was a man who, irrespective of all the hardships and difficulties that he had faced, with a very kind heart, with a very selfless and philanthropist attitude, he just got over all his problems and he rose above all. Not only from his prison cell but also in the struggle to unite his country. And he did not only prove his fervor to be the champion when he was in the prison, but even when he came out and when he had this urge to unite his country, to make sure that his country is together, is united, that also showed how much he loved his country and how much he craved for unity. So, my dear students, with this we come to an end of the explanation of this chapter. The chapter talks about Nelson Mandela's efforts. A very small incident has been described to us. There were hundreds and thousands of things and contributions made by Nelson Mandela in order to unite the country. What we read was only a small one in which he talked about the part played by the Springbok, the World Cup and rugby game.